Today, we're taking a hard look at the state of our world in 2026. We've gone through several major global security and humanitarian reports, and honestly, the picture they paint is pretty sobering. We're going to break down why the world feels more on edge than it has in a very, very long time. Let's dive in.
So let's start with a number, 30. Over 30 countries, according to the top international conflict monitors. That's how many are currently caught up in high-intensity armed conflicts. And listen, these aren't just minor border skirmishes. We're talking about full-blown wars with absolutely devastating consequences, both for the people on the ground and for the rest of the world. So the first big takeaway when you look at all the data is this. 2026 is seeing a massive, serious spike in armed conflict. And it's not just one or two big wars that are dominating the headlines. No, this is a global thing, and it ranges from huge state-on-state wars to these sprawling, really complex insurgencies.
And here's why things are so tricky right now. The whole nature of war itself is changing. It's not just nation versus nation anymore. What we're seeing is this messy, dangerous mix of conventional wars, proxy conflicts that are funded and armed by outside powers, and these insurgencies that just keep spreading. It's this tangled web that's making global security feel more fragile than it has in decades.
Okay, so where is all this actually happening? Let's zoom in a bit and get a high-level look at the main conflict zones that are really defining the global landscape right now.
This matrix gives us a really important snapshot. Let's just walk through it. Start at the top, in the Middle East. The status? Escalating rapidly. We're talking about a regional war with direct clashes involving the US, Israel, and Iran. Okay, now look down at Ukraine. A totally different kind of fight. A brutal stalemate, a true war of attrition. And then you see places like Sudan and Myanmar. Just devastating civil wars where the situation is either deteriorating or escalating into a total humanitarian collapse.
And beyond those big headline wars, you've got what some analysts call the hidden wars. Take the Sahel region in Africa. It's now the global epicenter of terrorism, with insurgencies tied to al-Qaeda and ISIS forcing huge numbers of people from their homes. And then there's Mexico, where a non-stop, hyper-violent war is raging between the government and incredibly powerful drug cartels. Cartels armed with military-grade weapons, racking up a staggering death toll year after year.
It's really easy to get lost in all these maps, tables, and data points. They're important for understanding the scale of it all, but we have to remember what these numbers actually represent. So let's shift gears from the big picture to the deeply personal, human cost of all these conflicts.
Just take a moment to look at this image. This young girl waiting in line for drinking water. The single photo, it just powerfully captures the daily struggle, the exhaustion, and the immense toll these wars take on children and their families who are just trying to survive. And that little girl, she is just one of 1.7 million children in the Gaza Strip who are in desperate need of humanitarian help. To put that into perspective, that's nearly every single child in the entire territory. A whole generation is facing this crisis. And think about this. Where do kids build a future? They do it in school. But in Gaza, as you can see, 97.5%, almost every single school has been damaged or completely destroyed. The long-term impact of wiping out a generation's access to education? Well, it's almost impossible to calculate.
And this is the cost in its starkest, most brutal form. As of February 2026, more than 21,000 children have been reported killed in the conflict in the Gaza Strip.
And this kind of humanitarian disaster isn't happening in isolation. If we look over at Myanmar, the civil war there is escalating so badly that the UN projects that over 16 million people are going to need humanitarian aid this year. That's nearly 1 out of every 3 citizens in the country.
You get a sense of just how bad it is when you look at events like the airstrike on a hospital back in December 2025 that killed at least 33 people. I mean, this wasn't just some tragic accident. It sparked international condemnation and serious calls for war crime investigations. It just underscores the brutal tactics being used.
You know, the human cost isn't just measured in casualties. It's also measured in lost hope. This chart right here tracks whether Ukrainian refugees in Germany plan to return home. Just look at that dramatic drop. Back in 2023, almost half of them intended to go back. Fast forward to now, 2026, and that number has plummeted to just a fifth. The longer the war drags on, the more that dream of returning home just erodes.
And for those who did manage to escape, a whole new struggle begins. And here we see this really painful paradox. Ukrainian refugees are, by and large, highly educated. About 3/4 of them have a university degree, and yet 2/3 are unemployed in Germany. So what's going on? Well, the data shows huge barriers, like not being fluent in the language and having their professional qualifications not be recognized. So after seeing the sheer scale of these conflicts and their devastating human toll, you have to ask the big question, why? Why is all of this happening right now? Let's zoom back out and try to analyze the underlying factors that are fueling this global surge in warfare.
Let's just ask it directly. What is driving this period of intense global instability? What's going on?
Well, security analysts point to these 4 things all happening at once. First, there's a breakdown of traditional deterrence. As some global powers have stepped back, it's created a vacuum. And that vacuum is being filled by powerful proxy militias. Often, these fights are fueled by a fierce competition over resources. And then, the real game changer that makes everything worse is the spread of cheap but incredibly lethal drone technology. It gives even small groups the power to inflict major damage.
So, where does all this leave us? What are the big takeaways? And what does the future of global security look like? This quote from one of the reports we analyzed really just nails the problem. All these conflicts we've looked at, from the Middle East to the Sahel, they don't exist in a bubble. Their effects, like refugee crises, economic shocks, and supply chain disruptions, they just spill across borders, creating this interconnected and incredibly fragile global landscape. And that brings us to our final thought. It really seems like the old models of global security are breaking down. So as we all try to navigate this new, really volatile era, the fundamental question we're all forced to confront is this: what does security even mean anymore? And how on earth do we build it?